started with an architectural firm, Larry Goldberg and the Goldberg Group and Associates. And Larry's got a long history of jail design, and I think he was near the 300 mark when he designed this jail across the country. So quite the resume. And from there, it was building relationships, and then it was looking at construction management teams, and then it was looking at other types of vendors that we would need. So I talked to Larry about doing, a modular style or next generation jail, I like to call it. And of course, Pauly Jail came to mind for Larry, and I said, well, let's take a peek at them and see. And so it started with a relationship with the architect, and then it moved on from there. And so, we got to Pauly Jail. I got to know the guys from Pauly Jail. They came here, and I sat and talked to them for days. And I actually was in the mix when it came time to picking the type of cells and the type of doors and which way the doors opened and whether it had a window or not. And so I learned an awful lot, and they've been fabulous to work with. There was one particular thing that I didn't want in this new facility. Coming from a linear bar jail right across the street that's going to be demolished within a month. We were in that since 1972, and it was really only configured for a 218-bed facility. And it grew through renovations and additions to a 513-bed jail. But it was all linear, and it had large dorms. So say a 25, 30-man dorm, or a 35-man dorm, or a 76-man dorm, minimum security. That's a lot of people with a lot of resources on my end to have to deal with. So I told Larry Goldberg, I don't want any dorms. I don't want any. And he said, but Sheriff, you got to have some dorm. And I said, I don't have to have any dorm. If I don't want one, I don't want one. I really don't. And so Larry, being the professional he is, went back to the drawing board. He designed this facility, nearly 100,000 square feet, no dorms. And it's working out very well for us, because here we've been operating now for almost 6 months, and we're doing a great job of making sure that the employees are safe, making sure that the inmates are safe, which is important because I want to reduce liability. And so this building allows us to do that, and we are doing it without the dorms. So that's one thing that I wanted to not have in the jail, and I'm glad that Larry was receptive to it. When we looked at this particular build, I knew we needed a new jail. Saginaw County knew we needed a new jail. My commissioners knew we needed a new jail. The big elephant in the room was, how are we going to pay for it? So, of course, the first thing out of most politicians' mouths are, we need to raise taxes. Put it on a special ballot or a millage. And I said, I'm not going to do it. And they said, well, that's not your role, Sheriff. That's our role as the legislative branch. You're in the executive branch. And I said, I understand, but I'll be voting no on that proposal if you put it on the ballot, and I'll tell everybody else to vote no. And so they said, well, then you better come up with another plan. So I sat down with the staff, and the plan that we came up with is what we actually did with the support of the commissioners and the controller. So I looked at a staff that I had, and I looked at the population of inmates, 513 in a linear style jail. So talking to staff, I realized if we could reduce the number of staff that we have, we could use the savings to pay for a bond, finance this building. So it was a question of how far do we go, how far can we go and do it safely? So we reduced staff by 28%. No layoffs, no terminations. It was attrition, people that retired. It was taking some members who wanted to be law enforcement officers, putting them through the police academy, getting them out the other side into a different fund, the law enforcement fund. And little by little, over a 2-year period while this was being built, we got down to the magic number, the 28% reduction. The commissioners promised to keep my budget the way it was before the reductions, and the savings carried forward over 30 years pays for this. And the best part about it is we didn't lose bed space. So we didn't sacrifice public safety by reducing the number of jail beds. We did reduce staff through the ways that I just mentioned, and we're able to pay for it without raising taxes. So the public appreciated it. So what we looked at then was, how can we do it for a particular price point? And we wanted to keep it at a particular price point because I didn't want to delve any further into slashing staff anymore. And so we kept it around $38 million. With that being said, brick and mortar costs a lot of money. So when you look at our facility, it's brick and mortar from the ground up to about 16 feet. The housing level above us is exterior inside aluminum panels. and a maintenance hallway on the other side of it, and then steel cell construction all the way around. So this is where Pauly Jail helped me get to where I needed to be. If we would have had to build a linear style jail, block, concrete, mortar, etc., price tag would have gone up astronomically. I wouldn't have been able to handle as many inmates with fewer staff. So we needed all of these things to happen. So when Larry Goldberg said, "Sheriff, I want to introduce you to the members of Pauly Jail Company," I said, "I don't know what Pauly Jail is, but I'm interested in seeing what they have." I've been more than pleased with what I've seen in this facility. The cells that we have, they're either single cells for maximum security prisoners, they're double cells for medium security, and they're 4-person cells, no more than that. We can then safely get them in and out of their cells by pushing a button from a control center on each of the housing level floors. The cells are double stacked on each floor, so what is technically a 3-story building really is almost a 6-story building when you measure it. However, with that being said, it allowed us to have maintenance corridors around the very back. We can check in on the inmates. We can put opaque glass in small sections at the back of their cells so they can see daylight coming in, but they can't see out. So we can be compliant with not only state law, but federal law. So that was important. So Pauly Jail allowed me to do all of the things that I couldn't do across the street in the old jail that I can do now, and I'm actually required to do, and we went above the regulations, above the requirements that are set forth nationally. We went above that because we looked down the road to say, well, what could change? And how can we be in compliance with what we think may be coming 5 years from now, so we're not out of compliance in 5 years. So again, Pauly Jail, the concept of the steel cells being brought in, I remember those trucks coming in, they were lifting them up on cranes, sliding them in, putting them all around. It's a beautiful thing to see. And now that we're actually doing it, lo and behold, we have a pandemic on our hands. The same month we opened the doors. And this jail was built for pandemics, because could you imagine if I had 28-man cells, 30-man cells, 76-man dorms? We could have cases skyrocketing of COVID-19. We haven't had any. None for the inmates. That is not only luck, I think, but it's also good practice. We have a jail that allows us to separate people. And we could then put people who would normally be in a 4-person cell into a single cell. Negative airflow, medical on all floors, testing at the front door, testing in the sally ports. So we've been very successful, but it isn't without a little bit of foresight. And again, I go back to Pauly Jail. Everything that has happened to see the reality of this building went into a lot of prior knowledge and a lot of relationship building. It started with Larry Goldberg, it went to Pauly Jail, it went to Accurate Controls. All of these things go hand in hand, and it's worked out better than I could have imagined. I was asked by a county commissioner in Vigo County, Indiana, where Indiana State University is, to come and speak. First, it was a question of, Sheriff, I see that you are in the process of building a jail. This was 6 months before we opened the doors to this facility. We were nearing completion. And this commissioner was tasked with looking at possibly building a new jail in his county. And the price tag he was getting quoted was nearly double what we actually were doing it for. And he had a smaller jail planned. So he called me and said, is it fake news that you're building a 511-bed facility and you're doing it for $38 million? I said, no, that's not fake news at all. So he asked me if I'd speak. I went, I spoke to the commissioners, I spoke to the sheriff, I spoke to a group of citizens, Indiana State University. And of course the questions came up, well, how did this happen? And I started with saying the same thing I mentioned earlier. It started with an idea. Number one, we have to have an idea of what we want. Then it takes an architect, a professional who understands the needs of each individual community. There is no rubber stamp, there is no cookie cutter jail. There shouldn't be anyways. Every community has different needs. Our needs were different than most. So it starts there, and then it goes on to the vendors. And again, with the relationships with the Goldberg Group and Associates, it led us right down the road to Pauly Jail, Accurate Controls, etc. So a question from the audience came up. Well, gee, Sheriff, you're in Michigan, we're in Indiana, and you must have cheaper labor up there or something. And I said, well, that's a good point, but I'm going to disagree with that because my architect lives closer to you than he does to me. He's from Missouri. And accurate controls and Pauly Jail are a lot closer to you than they are to me. And to top it all off, we used union labor on 90% of the jobs with prevailing wage in the state of Michigan to get this job done. Built by people who live in this area that belong to unions from the local 25, iron workers, the local 85, plumbers, steam fitters, and HVAC personnel, you name it. The sheet metal unions, the carpenter unions, all of them. They came, they built it, and they didn't do it for a scab labor, as this individual was referring. If someone asked me if it was another sheriff or another county that said, Sheriff, what would you recommend we do? First of all, do a good bid process. Ask for recommendations for sure. And make sure you follow up. So you get a Goldberg Group coming into you, call, get references. Call me. I'll give you a reference. Absolutely. I will always give Larry Goldberg a reference and Pauly Jail a reference and Accurate Controls a good reference because they've done a fabulous job for me. I've been fortunate. I've been very fortunate to be here 12 years to see this thing through. And in 2 weeks, maybe it'll be on my way to 16 years, but time will tell. At least I had an opportunity to enjoy this office. But while I'm here, I would tell individuals, make sure that the players that you have are either able to see it through or that they can pass that information along because it's a start and stop type of a thing and it doesn't happen overnight. And you really have to make sure, your interest rates are right, that your financing is right. Don't ever walk out the door and assume that people will vote yes to build a brand new jail, because quite honestly, most people don't. They'll vote yes for police officers to protect them. They'll vote yes for libraries and schools, for fire departments, etc. But it's hard to say, I'm going to give a little more money so that the inmates can have a nicer place. That's what most people think. Even though it reduces our liability, it's safer for my staff, it's still a hard sell, which is why I never wanted to go down that road. For those that do, there's a way to approach that. Again, from 30,000 feet, you've got to be able to look at it. You can't get right down on the ground and start there. You have to go way up high and look down at everything. And for most, including myself when this started, I didn't know what that looked like. So I know what it looks like now. And should anyone see this interview or want to talk to me about my thoughts, not only on a new build, what that means for their community, I'd be happy to do that because I think it's good to share that, again, amongst other professionals from law enforcement or from county organizations across this country, but also then to recommend the good that we've had here. The Pauly Jail, the Accurate Controls, and the Goldberg Group. Again, without those three, I wouldn't be as pleased as I am today. Yes, I'd be happy to talk to anyone, whether it be a sheriff, a county commissioner. We've had sheriffs and staff coming in from Iowa, South Dakota, all over the country, calls. And so what we've done here with the assistance of Larry Goldberg and the Goldberg Group and Pauly Jail and Accurate Controls is to create something very unique that not only does its job, but it does it efficiently, and it does it at a cost factor that is far below anywhere I've seen in this country.